Washington Watch. I'm Tony Perkins, your host. So good to have you with us. The website, tonyperkins.com. All right, at the top of the program, Lieutenant General Jerry Boykin and I broke down parts of the president's State of the Union address last night, during which he spoke very proudly of his administration's handling of the situation in Ukraine. That, of course, is not the only area where the president gave himself not so deserved pat on the back. Here with me now to discuss some of the other parts of the president's address, as well as the situation that it continues to unfold in Ukraine, is Senator Marco Rubio of Florida. He is the vice chair of the Senate Foreign Affairs Committee. He's on the Senate Appropriations Committee, the Senate Committee on Small Business and Entrepreneurship. He's the vice chair of the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence. Senator, welcome back to Washington Watch.
Hey, thanks for having me back, Tony.
Let's jump into this issue of Ukraine that has been unfolding in the last week, and how the administration is addressing it.
Well, I think it's interesting, right, that the first thing we did when we got back from recess in the Senate is a vote on an abortion on demand bill. Basically, would wipe out by federal law any restrictions of any kind on abortion. So basically, abortion 6-7 months into a pregnancy when a child is viable and the like. So I just think it tells you how messed up these people's priorities are, not to mention how macabre of a bill that is to turn that into federal law. They knew it wouldn't pass, but they wanted to have the vote anyway. That said,
I want to add to that because I think it's very, very important. I talked about this yesterday on the program. What a contrast between the two parties, and it was on full display there. But yet, Senator Schumer pushed forward, as you said, knowing they didn't have the votes to pass it. But yet, it is revealing about the priorities of the two parties.
Yeah. So right now we know the Biden administration has made a request for additional funds to provide not just for refugees but weapons and other munitions to the Ukrainians that are bravely fighting. That should have been the first thing on the floor. We know what the plan entails. They can just put that up. We probably won't get to that till the week after next or what have you, and that's too late probably at that point. You ask about their handling of it. Look, in times of crisis like this, I always try to pull my punches simply because I don't want to sort of give anybody any encouragement thinking that we're divided here. I will say we could do more. I do wish that something that Biden just won't do because the left wing of his party won't allow him to do it, and maybe he doesn't want to do it either, and that is increase American oil and gas production.
Right.
By 2018, we produced more oil, we exported more oil than we imported, and that has now flipped around. And so even as he announces he's releasing 60 million barrels from the reserve, half of those 60 million barrels are from foreign sources. So he needs to reverse that. He won't do it, obviously, because of the Green New Deal fanatics. But that's something we could do. And I really think we need to be providing more information about troop movements and the like to Ukraine so that they can be more effective in fighting these invaders off.
Senator, was Russia prepared for these sanctions? The president talked about last night, putting the squeeze on their economy. But you have to think that Vladimir Putin knew that this might be an outcome, and he was prepared for that.
So I think Putin looked at a couple things, right? He looked at the price of energy and how dependent Europe is on it. I think he viewed, for example, France as distracted by its elections, and the U.S. is not just divided politically but preoccupied with China, and he figured this is probably his last best chance to take back parts or all of Ukraine, or at least have a vassal state there and restore greater Russia, because he views himself as this great historic figure. And he knew that there'd be some economic pain, but I think he calculated this invasion would move quicker. Zelensky and the government would just abandon post and take off, and that they would be there pretty quickly and take control of the country pretty quickly without much of a fight. I think he thought he'd be greeted as a liberator in many places. And I think he expected there would be sanctions, but I don't think he thought they would be as widespread as they've now become, which includes everything, from, obviously being cut off of the international banking system all the way to the inability to fly anywhere. I mean, they literally have no westward path to a flight, which really complicates things for them. So their economy is in free fall. I think a week from now you're going to have a very serious crisis in the Russian economy, and I don't think he anticipated that or the resistance he's met and how badly his forces have performed in the face of it.
So, Senator, how long do you think this war could go on?
Well, I think Putin has some clear military objectives, and he's willing to kill civilians and commit war crimes to achieve them. So I think he'll push through until that happens. I think the problem he has is he can't win. He's either going to have a very bloody and protracted and costly military engagement, or he's going to have a very long quagmire occupation where the locals are going to be taking shots at him, and Russians are going to be coming home dead every day. So and his economy's in free fall because these sanctions that have been imposed aren't going away anytime soon. So he's got some real challenges right now.
Senator, also want to get your thoughts on whether or not he stops with Ukraine. Is there the potential that he moves beyond Ukraine?
Well, I think the thing I'd keep an eye on is how far west he goes in Ukraine, because if it brings him up across that region that borders Transnistria, which is a disputed territory within that the world recognizes as being part of Moldova. So that's something to really keep an eye on, and then obviously, how far west does he go? How close does he get to that Polish border, as an example? Because the further west he goes, the closer he gets to NATO troop presence, and then the more opportunity exists for that. And then there's Kaliningrad, which is this piece of Russia that's not contiguous, and the only way to supply it and get there is by driving through this corridor between Poland and Lithuania,
right.
Both NATO countries. So those are things I keep an eye on in the immediate future.
All right, Senator, we're up against a break. Stick around with us if you would, because I got two more questions for you. And one pertains to something I know you're passionate about. That is the country of China and what they're doing in wake of this. Folks, I'm talking to Senator Marco Rubio of Florida. He joins us again after the break. So don't go away. We come back with more Washington Watch right after this. Joining me, Marco Rubio. He is the senator from Florida, the the senior senator from Florida. He's also the vice chair of the Select Committee on Intelligence. Senator, before the break, we were discussing Ukraine. We're discussing where Putin may go. Let me ask you this question. As the United States has pledged to provide material to the Ukrainian forces, we see now the tactics of Putin is encircling these major cities. Is there a plan to get that material into them if they are cut off by Russian forces?
There isn't, and it's something that the world needs to start coming to grips with, and that is he's about to stage looks like his plan is to impose a medieval type siege on a city, which means you basically starve people into submission, and the world has to start thinking about what options do we have to break it. Is it working through religious organizations to open up a humanitarian corridor? Is it the use of unmanned vehicles to airdrop in supplies, which was done by some non-government organizations in Syria? I'm working on a proposal that I want to present to the White House and hoping they'll consider it. But you can't just sit by and watch that happen. I mean, and I'm not claiming our options are easy and not without difficulties and even some potential complications and danger. But I think the world needs to ask itself, are we going to watch an entire city of 3 million people get starved to death?
When you look at the forces that Putin is using, and he's not been using his air power as much, is there something else at play here, or any idea in terms of U.S. intelligence trying to figure out what Putin is thinking?
Well, it's not intelligence. I think what common sense. I think the problem he has, and by our Department of Defense has put this out, is that 40% of Ukraine's air defenses are still intact, and they have stingers and things of this nature. And so I think there's real fear on the part of these planes are expensive, and I think there's real fear on the part of Putin to fly these things in and have them shot down. They thought they were going to establish air superiority pretty quickly in this contest, and that didn't happen. And so, and these are mobile launches, right? These are individuals out in the field. It's not like some fixed-based situations, so they're hard to track down. So I think they're just afraid to fly them and lose them. So they've been trying to degrade that with missile strikes and things of that nature. But I think that element of it has gone away for them, and so they're relying on some really destructive, illegal munitions in many cases, and that's according to our own UN ambassador.
Final question for you, Senator Marco Rubio. This is an issue that you've been tracking and working on very closely, and in my role at U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom, I've worked with you on China, their humanitarian abuses of the Uyghurs and others. Is there concern that China may be doing other things in the wake of what is happening in Ukraine?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things at play here. First of all, I think China's watching very carefully to see what happens when you invade another country or another territory that you claim to belong to you. At its core, Russia and China are making the same argument, and that is that they are great powers and that they have a right to create vassal states, tributary states in their spheres of influence. There's also complications. I mean, China is the first to argue against separatists, whether they be in Tibet or Uyghur Muslims or Taiwan. They're arguing always that their policy is non-interference, and yet here you have their allies in Russia targeting, supporting separatists. So I would argue that if it's okay for Putin to support Russian-speaking fake separatists in Ukraine, then why shouldn't the world support the legitimate elected government of Taiwan, who doesn't want to be a part of China? In essence, if they're going to recognize, if they're going to support Russia's claim that these areas are independent of Ukraine, then why shouldn't the world start to consider supporting Taiwan, saying that they're independent of China? So they've got some thinking to do in that regard. All that said, I still think that if they can get away with it, China's going to try to help Russia evade sanctions without incurring sanctions of their own, and that's something we need to really keep an eye on and start thinking about how to keep that from happening.
Are we sending the right messaging when it comes to China right now with how we're handling the Ukrainian crisis?
Yeah, I think the Chinese have probably been shocked by the amount of global response to what's happened, but I also think they feel comfortable that their economy, Russia's economy, I think their GDP is the same as some of our states. I mean, it's a $2 trillion economy. It's the size of Italy, so it's not a big economy. China's is a much bigger economy. Our corporate class, our businesses, it's much more ingrained there than they are in Russia. And I think they feel like that economic power insulates them from some of the things that's happening to Russia right now. And if they can break that international system and create an alternative one that Russia benefits from, I think they'll really feel good about that and won't feel as limited about it.
All right. Senator Marco Rubio, always great to talk with you. Thanks so much for all you provide leadership to on Capitol Hill. Faith, family, and freedom. Grateful for you.
Thank you, Tony. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Anytime. Senator Marco Rubio.